So Bismillah, asserting the afterlife and the virtue of death and what follows of bliss. No one denies the resurrection or the second creation other than materialistic naturalists who have neglected their own thoughts and were ignorant of their own worth. Their own passionate desires for what appear to them as good among their appetites preoccupies them from reflection on their source and their end, as is mentioned in God's words. Made to seem pleasing to humanity is love of desires for women and children and heaps and hoards of gold and silver and domesticated horses and cattle and fields. Those are the conveniences for the life of the world, while the finest resort is the presence of God. As for the upright one, who does not walk as if falling on his face due to being like dumb cattle or even more astray, he has reflected on the constituents of the world and realized the best are those that have animate souls. And the best of those with animate souls are the ones possessing volition and free will in this world. Furthermore, the best of those who have volition and choice are those who consider deeply the consequences of matters, and this is the human being. Indeed, Allah did not grant such a particular gift to the human being except for something relegated to the ultimate consequence. If not, then this special gift of the human being would have been meaningless and in vain. The fact that we always think about the end, al-umur bi maqasidiha. This is one of Covey's 7, have the end in mind. Right? This is what intelligent people do. But this is our deen. We don't need a corporate consultant to tell us, because our deen says, umur bi maqasidiha. End should always be in mind when you do things. So he's saying that this gift that we have of being able to think about the end result of things, why do we have this gift? Because if it wasn't about the end result of existence and what comes after, it would really it would be meaningless. Like these materialists who say, in the end, it's all meaningless. Is this all just random? We're here due to random. So he says, had the end of human life simply been this miserable life, al-hayy al-khasisa, here below, filled with its trials, griefs, stress, and exhaustion. And this is real, people. Like, we're in blessings, but there are people really suffering. You know, if you're in Gaza, this rings true. If you're in Yemen right now, this rings true. It might not for some people in some areas of the world, but for many people, this is the reality of their life. It's trials, grief, stress, exhaustion, and with no condition of bliss afterwards. If we have to go through all this suffering and there's no condition of bliss, then the most contemptible animal would be better in their condition than the human being. It would also mean that all of these divine wisdoms and lordly wonders that God has manifested in the human being would be simply without purpose. As God said, do you figure that we have made you in vain and that you would not be returned to us? Surely had the perfection of man's form with all the wonders and marvelous aspects, followed by its nullification and destruction, been without any meaning other than to share with the other animals, eating, drinking, mating, on top of all the travails that accompany such a life, especially given that God has relieved the other animals of enduring many of these hardships. There's no stressed out animals out. They're not worrying about their 401k. You know, they're not worrying about the fact that their doctor just told them they have cancer. Right? They don't have to cook their meals, or they go out every morning and they find there's squirrels that come to my house every day. They know they're going to get cashews. They come and they literally sit there in front of the window like, come on, you guys are late. Right? They don't have that stress. The cats, look at them, look at the life. They're just lying around. They sleep. They don't, their ears are always a little. So the fact that that we have all this endurance, and then we'd be better off being animals if this was all meaningless, because they don't have all that stress. In that case, human life would be futile. Like she who breaks what she has spun after it's strung into untwisted strands. So this woman who, she was a woman in Mecca, there's a type of madness where people do this. And she would weave things and then she would unweave them and just do it over and over again. This also is a famous, in the Iliad, because the wife of Odysseus, she had all these suitors and she was waiting for her husband to come back. So she said, when I finish my weave, I'll accept proposals. So she would weave all day and then at night she would unweave it, waiting for her husband to return. So then he says, Transcendent is Allah. Ta'ala Allah. Transcendent is God. Far above and beyond such thoughts that this is all in vain. All of this, all of these wonders, all of these galaxies, all of these extraordinary creatures that Allah has made. This is all just haphazard. No meaning to it. How clear to anyone willing to throw off the veil of blindness is the veracity of Amir al-Mu'minin Imam Ali's statement, radiyallahu anhu. This world is a temporal abode, not a permanent one. So pass through it and don't attempt permanent residence. For you have been created for eternity. But you must pass from abode to abode until you come to the final resting place. Now, this next section, it's like he wrote it for us today. It's just so extraordinary. Unfortunately, many fools have been duped by people to whom they attribute great intelligence about their worldly affairs. All the while, these people deny any afterlife. They declare such statements as, well, if the afterlife was true, such brilliant men and others like them of such extreme intelligence and impeccable understanding, they wouldn't have denied it. So you have all these atheists that write their books, God is not great, right? All these, what was the other one Dawkins wrote? Yeah, the God delusion, right? You know, that all these, and they call themselves brights, you know, we're the smart ones. And then they have these things how, you know, the people with the highest IQs tend to be atheists. And now all these, now it's cool to be an atheist. It's uncool to be a believer, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to imitate those. They're cool. Yeah. So this is what. So this is who they're following. These genius people that have said, oh, this is all just a coincidence, just popped into existence from nothing. And all your apparent design, it's just a trick. You've just been fooled by a trick. It's all just a trick. You're not really designed. It just looks like that. It's just hit and miss over billions of years. What they fail to recognize is that intellect, despite being a noble substance, will only investigate those matters to which one directs it to. It has no independence as such, unless willfully directed to something. Hence, if it finds direction to immaterial matters of the afterlife, it will master such matters. But if it is directed only toward the material affairs of this material world, it becomes formidable in such matters and fully embraces them to the neglect of everything else. So they become great biologists and great mathematicians and great, right, politicians, because that's where they've directed their intellect to. And they've neglected. And that's why he says, أهملوا أفكارهم. Right? أهملوا وما عرفوا أقدارهم. They neglected their own thoughts. They didn't direct their thoughts to think deeply about the world and their condition in the world. This results in the inner eye's blindness. The basira goes blind. It's not, Allah says it's not the eye that goes blind. It's the hearts that go blind. This results in the inner eye's blindness concerning metaphysical matters of eschatology. In other words, what's coming after. One can find many examples of this in the Quran, as we mentioned earlier. Section on death as a door to paradise. Know that death as we know it, which is the separation of the soul from the body, is a means by which a person achieves eternal bliss. It is a transfer from one abode to another, just as was stated. Surely you are created for eternity, but you must transfer from one abode to another until you rest in the final abode. Hence, although outwardly death means annihilation and evanescence, in reality, it means a renaissance, a second birth. How excellent is this conveyed in the meaning of the poet when he said, the birth pangs of death came to him one day, and every pregnancy must complete its term. His conceit, the poetic conceit, was to make death akin to the pregnancy of a woman, the pangs of death like the pangs of childbirth, and being born into another world like the first birth, as a way of reminding us that this is one of the very purposes for existence itself. I had this idea, because I saw this little cartoon of two twins in the womb, and one says to the other, "Do you believe in mom?" And the other one says, "What's the proof for mom?" He said, "Well, where'd this womb come from?" He's like, "I was always here." So I had an idea for like a computer-generated conversation of these like twins, you know, that they actually are having this thing. But then the birth comes, and they're like, "Oh, what's happening?" You know, and then they come out into the world and they're like crying. And then the next scene is the two of them in a car as twins, adults. And they're like, "Do you believe in God?" What's the proof of God? And then they have a car crash. So he says, being born into another world like the first birth, as a way of reminding us that this is one of the very purposes for existence itself. One of the sages said, as long as man is in this world dwelling in his body, he is analogous to a chick within the egg. Just as the chick must break through the egg to be born, so a man, in order to find completeness, leave his body. Indeed, had it not been for death, the human being could never achieve wholeness. Hence, death is essential for the completion of one's humanity. In fact, given that death acts as the means by which one moves from this lower state to a nobler, more exalted one in the next life, God has called it tawaffiyan. Tawaffahu Allah, tawaffiya, because it's the fulfillment. You know, yafi bidainihi, he fulfilled his debt. So tawaffa is to make you fulfilled. It's to bring you into your completeness. O imsakan, to hold, to divinely take that person unto himself. God takes souls as their death or in their sleep if they aren't dead, keeping those sentenced to death and sending the rest to definite terms. Surely these are signs for people who reflect. For that reason, we find such expressions as tawaffahu Allah or lahiqa billah. He went back to God, and many such idioms. Given that death means a movement from a lower abode to a higher one, he or she who trusts God loves death. Indeed, only two types of people detest death. Those who do not believe in an afterlife. So the only pleasure to be found is here in this world. God describes them. You will find them indeed the most eager of people for life. Ashadun nas, right? Harasana ala al-haya. They have this intense, they want to live like 1,000 years.